Ladies and gentlemen, you should have. Ladies and gentlemen, afternoon, welcome. Can I have your attention, please? Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and visitors, this is a very auspicious event for the University of Johannesburg, and we are celebrating one of our milestones in our efforts to build an international profile of a university of global excellence and stature. So as part of that objective, the Department of Business Management has invited a lecturer, or we initiated a lecturer and student exchange with the university, between the University of Johannesburg and the Free University of Amsterdam. And one of the successful outcomes of that is a week-long visit by Professor Alexiev from the Department of Management at the Free University of Amsterdam. So I'm going to give some background and some introduction of Dr. Alexiev, but before I do that, I want to introduce the Dean of the Faculty of Management. He's going to do the official welcome, and after that, I will introduce the speaker of this afternoon to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra, and good afternoon to all of you. It's wonderful to have you here. The rest of the UJ community is already on Easter leave or kind of on their way. And I see that most of us who are here are kind of totally mindless about where we are, where we're actually getting towards. So it is really a testimony to your willingness and wantingness to learn that you are here this afternoon. So it's great to have you with us. Alex, a special word of welcome to you. And what I found fascinating about your topic, that it starts with boundaryless. Now, you all know that the QS rankings were released last night. So everybody in the world is now kind of checking out where exactly are we in the pecking order. And the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam is currently counted under the top 200 providers of management education in the world. And this year, I think I see that 9,772 universities qualified to be ranked. And we are kind of under the top 250. So we are on your heels, Alex. So this is, I guess, part of boundary, not having a boundary. There's a couple of things that really kind of interest me. And as you well know, since the end of last year, we've seen many changes in our country. Fees must fall, and whatever must fall and continues to fall, or maybe fall. We're not always sure what's going to happen. But we're going through an incredible change in the way that we see management education. And one of the topics that we think about and talk about and debate is decolonization. What exactly does it mean? How do we see this? And interestingly, when the whole debate started, I called a couple of my colleagues abroad and in the country and said, man, how do you understand this? And everybody's first idea was, you know what, actually we talk about globalization. I mean, we are a part of a worldwide community. And then there's a second kind of line of thought that kicked in as we were talking about this, and this was, you know what, but while we're dealing with what's happening globally, we also have a national responsibility. In our case, we have a national development plan, and we have a young constitution relatively, and this is what needs to be honored. But then we also need to reposition the continent, so there's a regional aspect as well. But then at the end of the day, you can't do this unless you are internally excellent. So there are actually four things that play on the same platform: internal excellence and stature, national excellence and stature, regional excellence and stature, or continental if you want to, and global. And all of these work together. But at the end of the day, and it's so good to have students here tonight, what does it mean to decolonize? The view at this stage in the faculty is, and this is kind of an emerging conversation, is that if you colonize, then you almost embed a particular educational system in a new place. If you decolonize it, you don't throw anything away, but you say, okay, I need to use new forms of thinking in order to enrich what we have. So as a faculty, We cannot be stuck in a particular paradigm and have to continuously explore what's happening in the world, how people are thinking, in order to provide a much broader perspective. And I think at the end of the day, at the key of all of this is, if you can't make up your own mind, somebody else will do it for you. And it's normally people who are well informed and understand how the puzzle fits who are able to inform themselves and lead others. Okay, that was much longer of an introduction than I intended, but this is what I had on my heart. So, Alex, wonderful to have you with us. We're looking forward to hear your views. Thank you.
Thank you for that long introduction, Prof. But it's my honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Alexiev. He holds a PhD in strategic management, and his field of interest is in innovation, decision-making, new ventures, entrepreneurial finance, and general business. He has an extensive publication record. He has supervised many students, postgraduate students, and he has presented countless papers at academic conferences. At the VU, at the Free University of Amsterdam, he holds a prominent position as assistant professor, and he serves on many high-level committees at the VU, and he doesn't even have a single gray hair. During his visit to UJ, just for this week, he has been lecturing on the undergrad and postgraduate programs, and he is here this evening to present this much anticipated speech on boundaryless organizations and the future of management education. So over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. Thank you all for being here. It's really great pleasure to visit this country and this place, this university. I'm having a wonderful time meeting you, meeting the students in these couple of days. It's a tremendous experience for me. I learn a lot of new things, I experience a lot of interesting vibes, a lot of interesting atmosphere at this place. So for me, it has been quite an interesting experience. Thank you, Cassandra, for inviting me here, making sure that all this happened. So for me, it's great honor and pleasure to stand in front of you and tell you a few things about a topic that is really interesting to my heart. It is about management. It is about organizations. So how people work together to achieve common goals. And we've traditionally thought about organizations as entities, as closed-off objects where a particular hierarchy is in place, where a particular practices and structures organize how people do things. Well, in the talk that I will provide you today, I will try to break down this common understanding of what organizations are. I will try to provoke you to think beyond the limits of our current understanding. So the title is in this way also boundaryless organizations. So what do we mean by this idea? Which kind of boundaries do we need to drop? And what are the forces behind this phenomenon occurring? In my observation, there are certain trends that we observe in the world and especially regarding to organizations. So I'm going to describe you 4 of these trends that are currently happening. In the welcome, I think we mentioned globalization, and that is indeed one of the key trends that's happening as well. But I've got 3 others, which I think also contribute to the development of these boundaryless organizations. And in my view, these are the organizations we will have to deal with more and more in the future. So let's have a look at these four trends. In the first place, we will talk about professionals. So one of the main changes that is happening with regard to how people work is the shift of attention from management or from structure to the professional themselves. So we have a different way of working, a different way of participating in this common endeavor, what organizations are trying to achieve. I will show you some examples from my country, from the Netherlands, where we actually see these trends happening quite ostensibly. It's quite clearly we see a trend in a particular direction. So when it comes to independent professionals, so think about people who do not belong to a organization, who do not have a work contract. We've seen in the recent years that their numbers have tremendously increased. And as you can see from this chart, currently their percentage of the workforce has surpassed 10%. That may look as a small percentage, but consider that these are people who work independently, freelancers who manage their own business, who manage their own job, in fact. And as you can see, this increase has been quite steady in the last more than 10 years. It's a consistent increase of independent professionals. Here you can also see, compared to just people on the payroll, how has that changed? And the trend for people who work in companies is actually downward. We see less people employed. On the other hand, the independent professionals have continuously been growing. Why are these type of professionals interesting? Why do we need to think about independent professionals? Why do we need to shift our attention to them? I think there are a few important reasons to look at. Their participation in the working life presents a new pattern, a new change in how work is being done. So their contribution at the workplace is different than regular employees. Organizations, from their point of view, so from the point of view of the professionals, organizations that they work with are tools, are pathways for achieving and extending their own knowledge and competencies. Their whole participation in the working life is driven by an ambition to grow, an ambition to increase knowledge. So the core competencies are playing an important role for this type of professionals. And these are competencies that we traditionally have been neglecting. From a Western point of view, from, let's say, the Netherlands, these are competencies that minorities have. Well, here it's the other way, it's a majority. These are competencies that women have. And we understand management. If we see the profile of top managers around the world, it's more or less exclusively men. Very small percentage of women are actually participating in the high-level management of organizations. However, this change shifts to competencies that are actually quite central for these groups of individuals. So you can think of competencies like relationship management, skills of referring to other people, partnering and cooperation, working with supportive sensibility. These words seem a little bit foreign for current organizations. I think in the future they will become more and more central, more important. So for these independent professionals, their identity there is to be entrepreneurs, to be the master of their own fate, to manage their own career and develop themselves by working and building their portfolio of experiences, work experiences with different companies, sometimes even with the same company, but with a much larger variation in compared to individuals who spend their whole career within the single organization. So for these people, continuity of projects ensures learning, and that learning happens at the different customers in terms of the relationship they have with the various organizations. Here's an example. Silicon Valley is a classical place where this phenomenon occurs. It's always given as a something to look at as an example for how can highly qualified professionals can contribute to innovation, to high technology discoveries. And the key point in in this area in the United States is that they're not bound by employee contracts. Of course, they have employee contracts, but in the Silicon Valley, as some of you may know, it is forbidden to have a non-competitive clause in your employment contract. So it's very easy for a professional to jump ship to a competitor, or to what also often happens, start their own company. We've seen some of the biggest companies nowadays emerging from that cluster, started by dissatisfied former employees of large corporations. And they've built, well, sometimes also their own large corporations, if you think of Google or Apple. But this phenomena occurs quite frequently at this place. So what are the consequences of this phenomenon for the organizations themselves? I just talked about what is it, how does it look like from the perspective of the professional. But if you look at the organizations, for them, what's in it for them? Well, what the main thing that happens is that these professionals become quite a valuable resource. And that main reason for that is exactly their portfolio of diverse careers. The different experiences that they've had by completing projects for all kinds of different parties makes them quite valuable and rare bundles of competencies that are useful for organizations, especially for organizations that aim at being innovative, organizations that try to change and improve themselves. So firms can actually tap on this specialized knowledge built through different projects, and also allows them to connect with a variety of these kind of professionals and bring them exactly the knowledge that they need, the piece of knowledge that they need in the puzzle of a new product or a new market, or something that completely can change their current stagnating business model. So we see that the rise of these professionals is actually welcomed by large corporations, if their management, of course, recognizes that. The second trend that we see, and that is globalization. But more specifically, this globalization has this flip side, which is regional specialization. Some of you may know the projections about the so-called emerging markets in the future. It's one of these graphs that I've scraped off the internet. Within a few decades, it is expected that some of the main emerging markets will surpass, in terms of growth and production, the traditional largest economies in the world. It's already happening. China has already surpassed the United States, Japan as a second economy in the world. Most importantly, globalization presents us with problems that no single country can solve on its own. Climate change, international terrorism. We saw what happened yesterday in Belgium. Human trafficking, healthcare, inequality. All of them are issues where no single country can actually find a way out. So cooperation is a must in in the current world. And corporations and firms play an important role in this on this landscape. Um, their competitive advantage or their contribution is in their exclusive capability of organizing efficiently processes that can bring and create value around the world. This is a scheme of a company that has a value chain, which is basically different elements of what they do spread all over the world with, with partners contributing from across different continents, from Brazil to South Africa, China, USA, and then connecting to markets in Canada, Switzerland, and so forth. This is already happening. This is not news. This is the way many of the current organizations actually operating, which provides opportunities for locals, for locations to specialize, and in this way connect and be part of these global value chains. This phenomenon is related to the so-called increase of the so-called creative class, but also the flip side and the negative side, the downfall of people who are less educated, who somehow in this current environment may have a contribution that is less valued. And that creates certain tensions and problems in this age. The consequence for organization of this trend of globalization and regional specialization is, of course, the new opportunities for regional collaboration among specialized firms. So here we see the boundaries in their classical sense, national boundaries that have to be overcome or have to become less important. Of course, we have the experience within Europe with the establishment of the European Union. Nonetheless, with different events happening around the world, we see this initial strive for collaboration and dropping of boundaries to be threatened. We see forces that actually work against this trend. So it's not given that we will preserve this spirit of collaboration, spirit of international partnering in the future. So this collaboration across borders can be driven by firms as well. A lot of multinational corporations do that. Of course, in many situations, that is being equated to going off abroad to find cheap labor or reducing their overall costs. But I think if the trend of regional specialization will continue, the opportunities for companies to go abroad will be not only cost-driven, they'll be actually knowledge-driven, and they'll be actually opportunity-driven. So I think here it creates an important possibility for the future. The third trend I would like to draw your attention to is the market for ideas. It is also a knowledge-related trend. So what do I mean by market for ideas? Think about a phenomenon like franchising. Here we see the possibility of an established concept, typically of a service firm, to be applied in the future, to be applied in a different context, in a different market. And it's a common way for companies to grow. We've seen that it is quite volatile, that it is not a trend that is continuously growing. We see often that it follows the economic cycle. So if there is a downward economic growth, we see that also franchising suffers. We've seen in the Netherlands, for example, Up to the financial crisis of 2007 and 8, an enormous growth of actually businesses that have chosen the franchising model for their growth. We saw up to about 40% growth in these years. Since then, however, these numbers have more or less stagnated. We've seen also, but in countries like the Netherlands, this is also driven by the increase of online retail, that many of traditional traditional retail models are not working anymore. Nonetheless, it is a persistent way of actually trading with your idea, trading with your concept for doing business. Another example is the variety of institutions that are supporting, that are creating these markets. Think of patent offices, think of trademark registration bureaus, think of all kinds of associations for the protection of intellectual property. So we create a new good, which is the idea. And the market for ideas is where we can go across our existing boundary. Here is the patent of the iPhone, also a way of protecting the trademark, something that Apple as a company has benefited from. So the consequences for boundaryless organizations from this trend are that it has become much more easier to buy an idea once it is proven successful. And from the side of the seller, it is also easier to grow and develop your company further through selling your original idea, provided that you're able to protect it. Finally, technology. That's something that it's almost inescapable to add in a list of trends. It has tremendously changed our lives in the last couple of decades. If we look at the ranking of technology companies, internet companies, 20 years ago, at the dawn of the internet, the top 15 companies had a cumulative market value of about 16, 17 billion dollars. What we see now, last year, is that number is about 2.4 trillion US dollars. As you can see, the stock market has values this company enormously. The top list, of course, names like Google, Apple, Facebook, but also players from China like Alibaba. And why are these companies so successful? And how does it relate to boundarylessness? Well, of course, the internet cuts across different boundaries. But more importantly, in markets and how actually we trade with each other, there are important changes happening. Here are a few examples of corporations that have actually succeeded in breaking established business models of how we actually trade. eBay, an online auction system. Etsy, a place where you can sell handmade products. It has, for instance, 35% of the new businesses are started without any capital investment, compared to just 21% of regular small enterprises. Airbnb, an incredible phenomenon in the hospitality industry. They pride themselves to be the largest hotel chain in the world, with the most beds available. I'm staying with an Airbnb here in Johannesburg. I'm offering my place in Amsterdam as an Airbnb host. I'm participating in this phenomenon. The only thing you need is a smartphone with an app, and everything is arranged. You are part of a new exchange, of a new kind of transaction that is quite different than traditional ways of doing this service. Upwork is a website where independent professionals, freelancers can connect with each other. Really ties in with the first trend I talked about. Uber in the taxi branch, and so on and so on. Plenty of examples where actually boundaries of existing business models, boundaries of existing industries are now redrawn or changed. So the impact on organizations is tremendous. Of course, incumbent companies may feel threatened about it. So others may try to jump on the bandwagon, jump on the trend, and contribute with their own um, new innovative strategies. Uh, if you think about collaboration, then these new technologies are changing, and it's currently happening. It's not even something for the future. They're changing collaboration inside the firm, but also outside the firms. Different ways of working together, teams that are distributed at different locations, online meetings that are conducted as simultaneously. Um, Different ways of organizing work and maintaining coordination and control across different locations, across different geographic and all kinds of boundaries. Collaboration outside the firm is changing. We talk about open innovation, breaking the processes of how research and development within companies is happening nowadays. Companies feel and understand the need that they do not possess all their knowledge in-house, so they have to go out and search for new ideas, search for opportunities that actually can develop them further. Crowdsourcing, having a problem that is very tough to solve, why not open it up, set up to the crowd to find ways to actually solve it. Companies with, maybe you've heard of the project that is trying to um, catalog all the different stars and different planets that various telescopes have been able to observe, but there's just too much information for a single group of people, a small group of people to catalog and classify. They've opened that to the internet, and now thousands of people are contributing to this project in offering their contribution to this common goal. Co-creation is also quite a typical thing, more and more happening nowadays, also in terms of innovation, but also in marketing, and how customers are now currently not part of a focus group or part of some kind of a marketing test. They are at the table with the producers from the very first steps of an idea, and they actually contribute with different ideas. I was recently in Germany, and they've set up a location which looks like a coffee place where anybody who walks down the main street can walk in. And what they can find there are different companies who have some kind of an idea about something new they want to produce. And these people who enter are able to engage with these companies. It's a quite a fascinating place, and you can see that every 3 months they change the companies that are participating, and you see how the audience or the general public gets engaged in this project. So the consequences of this trend for firms are, of course, directly related to how we collaborate. Of course, we as researchers quite often work with co-authors from a very different country. And that has been supported by internet. And that's not new. That's already happening about 20 years, maybe more. Another issue that is being raised is the role of proprietary knowledge. So to what extent is the knowledge that I create then my own property? Or is it not by sharing and then having others access it, you create more value for the general public as well? Protecting sensitive information is an issue that also been discussed. Social media. How can we employ social media for valuable goals? I saw here in the library, there's a lot of students that just go to YouTube. Is that good or is it bad? Is social media important for work, or is it more of an entertainment function? There are companies who try to ban social media on their workplace, others who actually try to use it. There are corporate solutions of similar to Twitter, like Yammer by Microsoft. So these were the four trends that I think are quite contributing to this idea of boundaryless organizations. So what I tried now to connect is to, so the thing that I'm trying to connect this idea is to link it to management education, our business for researchers and um, teachers at the management departments. Are we able to prepare the workforce of the future considering these trends that are happening? Of course, I'm not suggesting that traditional organizations will disappear all of a sudden, that hierarchy and structure as we know it for many, many ages will suddenly be broken down. But as I tried to show you, these are quite visible trends, quite visible changes, and they are impacting the lives of at least a significant group of people. So I think if you look at it from the perspective of the management school and the management education, we need to take heed of that and give it some attention. So what kind of management skills do we need in this future of borderlessness? I found this report by the World Economic Forum, who has actually interviewed the uh, biggest employers around the world. It's a survey they continuously do. And they found that in the current year, there's a certain ranking of the most important skills that they may be needing. And what they also found is that in what employers expect in the coming 5 years, it's more or less the same kind of skills, but maybe in a different order. What struck me in this trend is that the top three of these skills, they don't seem quite new. It's basically bringing us back to what academia has as its core. So complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity. Oh, well, maybe we're not as good as promoting creativity, but at least the first two, it's our core business. And it also has struck me in the Netherlands, at least, there is a debate and around how close we are to the needs of the students. How can we make the education as a learning experience, but with the accent on experience? So it's a more of an enjoyable kind of 4 years that you spend, and then you get a diploma. What struck me from this list is actually that employers ask us to go back to our core, to focus on what we actually originally supposed to be. Academic institutions that stimulate or develop the critical thinking skills, the capacities for complex problem solving, but also all kinds of different ideas after that. So to me, the answer is, and that's my take on this, is the management skills of the future are actually the classical academic core skills for what universities are meant there. I think this listening to the customers can be done with a one step ahead. So thinking about the future, we need to connect with what actually is quite important. The second implication of these trends is related to how we teach entrepreneurship. Actually, there is a debate, are we able to teach entrepreneurship at all? I see people shaking heads. Yes, I think it's quite difficult, maybe impossible. However, what we can do is maybe teach entrepreneurial spirit. well, spirit doesn't sound like something what academics should be busy with. It's more like a kind of a very different domain. So it basically pushes us towards out of our comfort zone, providing knowledge. So teaching spirit is a different kind of business. And then finally, to enable boundarylessness, we need to also collaborate across the existing borders. But we like borders. People like to close off themselves in something that's familiar, something that is known and comfortable. And that's not bad. That's how we function as people, as humans. So to go across that, we need some kind of level of trust. So we need to engage ourselves in building some kind of a social capital, if you will. And that's not easy. And in certain societies have been able to achieve that to a larger extent. In others, it has been more difficult, even though there's some progress also booked. To me, from academic perspective, looking at our role as academics, I think our small contribution towards that is to become more engaged as scholars, which means that we go out of our campuses now and then. We engage with communities, we engage with businesses around the world. That's not easy. Our current reward systems are not tuned towards that. We're being judged on number of publication or ranking, but I think a ranking is also achieved by being an active participant in the community you are part of. So I think things are quite related. I hope it ties in with your introduction that building this new capacities for the future includes the participation of all the different parties, and in particular our own, taken from the point of view of educators, of researchers, and scholars. So this is what I would like to conclude with. I'm curious about your reactions and thoughts on this subject. Thank you very much.
Wow, Alex. Um, that was very enlightening. Can you hear me? The mic is on. Is it on now? Okay, much better. Thank you, Alex. Very enlightening. And as academics and managers of the Department of Business Management, I'm sure we thought of a lot of things and we were thinking, I'm already teaching that, or I've already exposed my students to that. Or maybe, wow, that's something I can bring into my course next time. And even from a management perspective, I'm sure management of the university also thought those kinds of along those lines. So this is your opportunity now to pepper Alex with a lot of questions. We will allow about 5 or 10 minutes, 10 minutes, I think, for questions and answers. So if you have a question, put up your hand, I will bring the mic to you. Otherwise, I will come and ask you questions to check if you listened.
Yeah, the first question, actually the question that I would ask you, it relates to your first word you talked about. Yeah, about the hierarchical organization.
Yeah.
And looking at the nature of our background and the university specifically, how do you look at, I mean, the trends are now saying, all right, the trends are now saying the organization to be active in this manner, it needs to be flat. How do we base the university in the present situation to link it up with the dynamics that you are talking about as they give us these challenges?
That's an interesting question, yes. I think we, in our curricula and in our way of teaching, we need to provide some room for these alternative ways of organizing, which are quite valuable